Hey there YouTube, Speedrobo here, and today I have a Magic World Wizard deck profile. But it's not just any deck profile for Wizards, it is a Wizard deck built around the spell, great spell, my Grandfather Clock. And the reason why I'm bringing up this spell so early in the profile is because everything about this deck is built around this one spell. This deck was built from the ground up to make use of Great Spell, my Grandfather Clock, and to spam it as much as possible. I've absolutely been having a blast with this deck, and this is one of my favorite casual decks to play. So there's a bit of a story behind it. I got the parts for this deck off of a friend of mine, and as I was going over it, trying to figure out how to make it work, I wasn't sure how to do it. And then my mom came up with the idea, hey, since Great Spell Grandfather Clock requires 6 or more different wizard in the drop, why not make every single monster a different card? And I said, you know what? That's crazy enough, it might just work. And it did. So today, I'm going to profile my crazy, every monster is a different card, Grandfather Clock deck. So to get started, I am going to talk about Grandfather Clock and show you exactly what it does. I run Grandfather Clock at 3 copies. I know it might be a little bit weird to run the boss card of the deck only at 3, but there's enough search in this deck that it absolutely works out. And this card costs 2 gauge to put into play. You may only cast this card if you have 6 or more different wizard in the drop zone. Return all cards from your drop zone to the deck and shuffle your deck. After this turn, you get another turn. So this is a way to just shut down your opponent and prevent them from getting turns at all if you can use this card enough. And you can chain one Grandfather Clock turn into another turn. It is great. So the next group of cards I'm going to talk about are the size 2 monsters, as they are the next most important cards, and they are the only monsters that I run at more than 1 copy. So I run 4 copies of the Buddy, Center of the World Mary Sue, a 4/2/3 size 2, call cost of 2 gauge. When she enters the field, search your deck for a spell and add it to hand. So this can search for Grandfather Clock or anything else you need. She is absolutely phenomenal and essential for any Wizard deck. The next size 2 that I run, 2 copies of Magic Knights of Bonds, Dunkelheit, and Licht, and this is the only card in the deck that I run at 2 copies. Everything else from here on out, 1 copy each of all the monsters. So, 7/2/7 size 2. You may only call this card if you have 2 or more wizard in your drop zone. Call cost of 2 gauge. Counter, act. You may discard a wizard from your hand. If you do, for this turn this card gains 3,000 power, and if this card would be destroyed, it remains on the field. You may only use this ability once per turn, and it comes with double attack standard. Phenomenal card, a 7/2/7 double attacker. The next size 2s that I run, 1 copy of Magical Secretary and 1 copy of Herb Magician. I'm showing them at the same time because they have the exact same effect. They reduce the cast cost of spells in the deck by 1. One of them's a 4/2/2, and the other is a 4/1/5. So as you'll notice through this deck, I found cards that have similar abilities or the exact same ability but different card names, meaning that they count as being different wizards. So the deck might have a bunch of one-ofs, but it's by no means inconsistent. Next, 1 copy of Magical Fighter, a 5/2/5 vanilla, and 1 copy of Barrier Master Shadow Flash, a 3/2/2 size 2 with the counter ability. During an attack on your opponent's turn, you may put this card from the field into the drop zone, and if you do, nullify the attack. Solid ability, kind of weak stats. He's in there because he's a wizard. Going into size 3s next, 1 copy of Hardy ABSC, Annihilate Buster Staff Custom, a 7/2/7 size 3 with a call cost of 2 gauge, and put a wizard monster from your field into the drop. Counter, act. You may pay 4 gauge and discard a wizard from your hand. If you do, destroy all monsters on your opponent's field and deal them 3 damage. I've actually been able to get this effect off in this deck. Doesn't happen a lot, but it's still nice. Next, I run 1 copy of Witch of Variance, Alice the Adjuster, a 2/1/2 size 3. Huh, that's interesting. Seems pretty weak, right? Well, she gets power +1, defense +1, and critical +1 multiplied by this card's size. So really, she's a 5/4/5 size 3. And she has the counter ability to pay 1 life and change her size to any size you want. She's in this deck because she has 4 crit base. Great opening play with this card. Next, 1 copy of Green Windmaster Rafaga, a 7/2/7 with double attack for 2 gauge. I run him because he's effectively another copy of Dunkelheitenlicht. And it's more or less the same story with Tempest Wing, but Tempest Wing's ability is phenomenal in the current meta. Act, you may discard a wizard from your hand. If you do, put a monster from the field into the gauge. So, you know all those new indestructible monsters that are happening? Send them to the gauge. Tempest Wing is phenomenal. And I'm honestly thinking about upping him to 2 copies. Alright, let's talk about size 1s next. 1 copy of Will Glassart, a 2/2/1 size 1, that when he hits, I pay a gauge, draw a card. Good stuff. 1 copy of Actor Knight's Magician, a 1/1/1 size 1. When he's destroyed, pay a gauge, draw a card. I like drawing cards. Toto of the Unseen Hands, the JoJo card. 2/1/3 size 1, counter, act, energy, press. During an attack on your opponent's turn, you may pay 2 gauge. If you do, nullify the attack if it's not a link attack. Solid null option. 1 copy of Drago Wizard Medium, a 1/2/3 size 1, but if there's another wizard on your field, he gains 3,000 power. So, not bad. 1 copy of Transmitter Dendo. You can discard him from hand if you have 2 or more other wizard on the field, and charge 2 gauge, so he's a gauge charger. 1 copy of Noble Magician Suzuha, 1/1/3 size 1, Lineage of Heaven's Bell. When you cast a spell, put the top card of your deck into the drop zone. If that card is a spell, draw a card. Lineage of Heaven's Spell only activates once per turn. So, really strong ability. You either mill a monster, which is a wizard, or you mill a spell and draw a card. Either is very good. 1 copy of Magic Artillery Soldier Kenurner. 2/2/1 size 1. When you cast a spell, put a soul from a card in your opponent's field into the drop zone. Solid ability. 1 copy of Burning Wand. He's bad, he's in here because he's a wizard. 1 copy of Magic Power Researcher Ren. 2/2/2 size 1, and when you cast a spell, she gets an extra crit for the turn. Kenji of the Exploding Fists. 4/2/1 size 1. He's a vanilla and is a wizard. There you go. Burning Horn. He exists to be charged in the gauge. And 1 copy of Ideal Girl Mary Sue. 3/1/3 size 1. All Mine. When this card enters the field, put a size 2 or less monster from the field into the owner's hand. All Mine only activates once per turn. So, good ability. Let's talk about items next. Running 4 copies of Gunrod Hammerschmidt type CLA, a 3/1 item, equip cost of paying 1 life, and an act skill. Act, you may rest this card. If you do, deal 1 damage to your opponent, and mill the top 2 cards of your deck. If there's a monster among them, put the top card of the deck into the gauge. This card makes the deck work. It really does. This deck would be nowhere near as good without it. And this card is absolutely vital. And as a bonus, it's a wizard. And 2 copies of Gunrod Symphonian. A 2/2 item. Equip cost, pay 1 life. Act, you may rest this card. If you do, deal 1 damage to your opponent. And act, pay 1 gauge and destroy this card. If you do, put a card from the drop zone with great spell and its card name into your hand. So this can recycle Grandfather Clock. And going into spells, we already talked about Grandfather Clock. There it is again. 2 copies of Dragonspell Hiding Bomber. This card's pretty much essential for any Dragon World or Magic World deck these days. Spell. You may only cast this card during your opponent's turn. Cast cost to pay 1 gauge, and counter. Return a monster with 5,000 or less defense to its owner's hand or destroy it. So, great stuff. 4 copies of Little Light. This is effectively a better Launch Buddy Police. Put up to 1 monster from your deck into your gauge or drop zone. Shuffle your deck and then gain 1 life. Good stuff. Puts wizards in my drop. I like it. And 4 copies of Nice One. Wow, you run Nice One in a Magic World deck? Whoa, what's up with that? 1 copy of Great Spell, Special Elegant Amazing Wall. You may only cast this card if you have 6 or more wizard in your drop zone. Cast cost, pay 3 gauge. For this turn, all cards on your field cannot be destroyed, and you cannot be dealt damage. This is, in a way, a sort of extra Grandfather Clock card. It's not as good, costs a little bit more, but it does relatively the same thing. And what's cool about this card is that it has the wizard attribute, so that's why it's in the deck. And the last card in the deck, 4 copies of Shadow Crusader. This card is so essential for this deck as well. Cast cost, put the top 3 cards of your deck into the drop zone. Counter, for this turn, the next time you would be dealt damage, it is reduced by 3. Mills me is null. You need it. So that was my Grandfather Clock deck. Like I said, I've been having a blast with this deck, and I've gotten really good results with it at my locals. I wouldn't call this deck competitive. I wouldn't necessarily recommend taking it to any tournaments, but it is a lot of fun to play around with, and it isn't too expensive to build. Grandfather Clock is still a little on the pricey side, but overall it's fairly cheap. And the cool part is that you can just run whatever monsters you feel like. There's a lot of cards in here that I just have in to be extra wizards to make Grandfather Clock work. So pick your favorite wizard and go nuts. I've been Speedrobo, and I'll see you later.